I'll just check. Commissioner Dace, can you hear us?
Yes, I can. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Thank you. And welcome. I hope you're well.
I'm well, holding out.
So for the rest of the Commissioner Dace is in Wellington because his family has COVID, so he's not travelling to join us today. So welcome everyone. We'll open hearing 30.9, rezoning submissions in the Malvern area. And we have a schedule of submitters who will proceed to hear from today. But before we do that, just from the reporting team, anything for us before we hear from submitters?
Apologies. No, Chair, nothing to add at this stage.
Okay, Commissioner Lyle has some questions for you though, so we'll just proceed with those initially.
Thank you. Yes, I'm wanting to investigate a couple of things around DPR 3066, the MB Properties application. I've read the full report you have here, and I'm just a little bit concerned. Map 12.2 shows the extent of rezoning that is established around the existing activity for the mill, which was established in 1946. And from the evidence given from MV Properties associate, they are talking about there being some problems where they are with noise complaints over the intensive use of where they are, because they've basically, they're working at capacity, I think was the term used. And I'm just concerned when I look at the amount of general industrial land that we have zoned in the plan. They've applied for 16 hectares, which is quite a substantial block of land to be included in that, so they could relocate their operation to the other end, basically, of Darfield. I realise that is LUC3 class soils. Their evidence is also saying that there's 5 hectares of that that are contaminated. I just want some reassurance that there's some comments by Mr. Beard in 12.5 that there is sufficient industrial land zoned. And I'm just concerned that in that industrial land, should this activity wish to move somewhere else, is there anything we've got zoned that would accommodate such an activity that has dust, noise, etc.? I'm just wondering if we are leaving ourselves short in the industrial land that we have, bearing in mind the intensification of zoning around their existing operation and the housing creep that is happening around general industrial itself. I'm very much in the mind that we have, there's now a sewage connection to this community, and usually with a sewage connection we see a large amount of uptake of development, and I'm just wanting some reassurance that in the assessment of the industrial land that we have sufficient.
Yeah, this is something that actually relates also to Mr. Boy's submission in Ascot Park, and I think there was an assessment by Derek Foy, the economist for the council, that they, as long as the substantive part of industrial on Mr. Boy's land remained as industrial. I know he's seeking to rezone some of it as residential. And even with the Ascot Park, I think it's about 3 hectares industrial to residential, he viewed that there would be enough industrial land in the short term, medium term. With that specific site, the submitter didn't actually provide, there are some gaps in evidence. And the submitter has elected not to provide any more evidence, and I believe they're not appearing at the hearing. So there is a bit of a question mark as to whether the mill can appropriately relocate to those, either to Mr. Boy's industrial land or any other smaller vacant industrial land in Darfield. That, for example, may not meet their needs.
Thank you. I did notice there was a lack of any other evidence or any other, they don't appear to be appearing before us. There's been no attempt at conferencing with us over this at all by the MD Properties.
No, there hasn't been any. I understand that they don't want to appear,
Okay.
and I haven't had any further correspondence. But there are some technical issues to overcome
Yes.
with that site.
Thank you very much.
All right, well, at this stage, we'll hear from our first submitter, which is Kaianga Ora, who are appearing on Zoom, and we're hearing from their planning witness, Mr. Joe Jeffries. So, Mr. Jeffries, can you hear us?
Yes, I can. Thank you.
We can hear you. So good afternoon and welcome. You've appeared before us before, so you understand the format. Thank you for your evidence, which we've read. You don't need to read it to us, but you're very welcome to highlight key points, and then we'll see if we have any questions for you.
Okay, thank you. Yes, I would like to just highlight a few key points in there. So I have provided a statement of evidence and a rebuttal statement to address Kaianga Ora's request to provide a medium density residential zoning within a walkable catchment of the Darfield Centre. I support this request for the following reasons. Darfield is identified as a key activity centre in the proposed district plan, and this zoning is consistent with that status. A more enabling residential zoning adjacent to the Darfield Centre will help support the commercial centre and will better enable it to maintain a wide range of services. And this rezoning is consistent with the strategic direction of the PDP, including the urban form objective 1, which encourages urban growth to be in or around existing townships in a compact, sustainable form. It's also consistent with the urban growth objectives of the PDP. In my opinion, the rezoning request would enable the development of more compact and affordable housing typologies and close access to services, which would enable more people to stay in the Darfield community through different life stages. And it helps to reduce outward growth of the township, consistent with policy 9 of the Urban Growth Policy 9, which seeks to recognise and provide for the finite nature of versatile soil. It's also consistent with the national policy statement on highly productive land. This constrains the ability to rezone land surrounding Darfield for future urban use, increasing the need to provide for a greater level of development within the existing urban area. In my view, there is no reason to specifically encourage low density development in the absence of any specific constraints in these areas to justify that zoning. Darfield now has a reticulated wastewater network, meaning that that is no longer a constraint for more intensive development. And I do not agree that the lack of public transport is a reason against providing medium density zoning, as the requested zoning is for a small area within a short walk of the Darfield Centre. Further, public transport is not a fixed feature and may be provided in future if uptake of development is sufficient to support it. I do not agree that it is necessary to establish that there is current demand for the level of development that would be enabled by a medium density residential zoning, as that current demand is not a relevant justification on its own for constraining development to a lower level through the district plan. So the final point regarding the RMA amendments, which introduced the medium density residential standards. It is unclear whether these are required to be applied in Darfield, as the relevant parts of Darfield may not meet the definition of a relevant residential zone. However, the Kaianga Ora submission seeking a medium density zoning in Darfield was lodged prior to the passing of the RMA amendment introducing the standards. The reasons set out in my statements of evidence in support of this rezoning do not rely on this being required by national policy direction. My statement of evidence also includes a section 32 AA evaluation of the requested change, and the extent of the change requested is shown on a map included as an attachment to my primary evidence. I'm happy to take questions. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Raymond, any questions?
Oh, yes, thank you, Mr. Jeffries. I've just got one question, and it's about community consultation. I note the section 42A report said that this proposal might be a little premature until community consultation and the spatial planning exercise is undertaken with the community. Do you have any comments about that?
I mean, the community is going through a full proposed plan change and a variation, so that I would think there'd be some awareness of the changes that potentially could happen. This was in a Kaingora submission from some time ago on the proposed plan, and there was an opportunity for further submissions on that. Regarding the need for spatial planning, it's unclear to me what the reporting officer sees as needed there. I think that the general characteristics of the Darfield Centre, it's a small upzoning that is being requested here, are suitable for that zoning. So, yeah, I'm not sure what that a spatial planning exercise is necessary as a prerequisite to the zoning, but that could certainly be done to support the zoning, to identify any things that can't be addressed through the district plan that would support that greater density of development.
Perhaps you could ask at the end of the hearing today about spatial planning. About that. Did you hear me? Sorry, I didn't have the microphone on. I just said we perhaps could ask the section 42A also at the end of today about the spatial planning exercise they recommended.
Okay. Yeah. So I certainly think it's not. It could still be done, and it could certainly support the zoning. I probably disagree that it needs to be done before the zoning takes place.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, the Commissioner's just asked some of the questions about the spatial planning, which I was very interested to investigate as well. You're proposing that this blanket zoning be put across there, so it could be uptaken by people should they wish to do so. As part of your thinking, expectations of growth of this community and making provision for getting medium density along the main transport route ahead of time rather than later, is that where you're coming from?
Sorry, what do you mean by the main transport route? I guess
the centre of the township, rather than having the medium density squeezed into the exterior of the community as it grows later on. Are you're looking to enable it to happen closer to the centre around the more commercial area? Is that your thinking?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I guess the traditional way that growth is provided in these kind of communities is through outward expansion. So I am saying that regardless of what evidence we have on current demand can change quickly, and yes, I'm recommending having that capacity being available to be taken up. I think it's often been the other way around, where the demand has risen and there's not been capacity, and it is slow to change the plan once that demand's there. So I think it is important to have that level of capacity in place ahead of time if there's not other constraints to justify restricting the density there.
Thank you for that clarification.
Lindsay, any questions?
Yeah, just on this whole spatial planning view, Obviously, Selwyn District Council carried out a relatively recent 2016 Malvern area plan, which looked specifically at issues around growth in the area, particularly in terms of urban growth. There's also been a recommendation to us from Mr. Truan that the low density residential zone gets changed to general residential zone. So that automatically signals to us that there's an officer preference for an upzoning, if you like. But there's, in terms of the Malvern area plan and its relative recency and in the direction that has come about, what you're proposing is quite significantly different to the outcomes in that. So do you see where we are in 2023 with various different policy instruments which have come about, that there should be no recognition of the need to actually do some spatial planning before you decide specifically where such an increase in development capacity should be provided in a township such as Darfield?
I understand that area plan through the section 42A report reference does support some level of upzoning in Darfield. So I'm not sure there's an inconsistency what I'm recommending here in that area plan.
Yeah, but you're automatically looking at potential for an increase in capacity within 400 metres of the township, which is at medium density levels of density itself. So that indicates bigger buildings, less site coverage. Wouldn't a more appropriate mechanism to look at such that is to go through a particular spatial planning exercise to see whether firstly there's necessary in this location and whether it's desirable in terms of the urban design, urban amenities that there currently are, rather than just having potentially a blanket provision for medium density?
I disagree that it's a prerequisite for zoning. We have a reasonable amount of information to inform this, and there's still the possibility to do spatial planning to address non-district plan matters after the upzoning.
Okay, but that doesn't provide for any level of community input, community involvement in decisions about where growth should actually occur within a community such as Darfield, though, does it?
No, I mean that would be one of the costs of it, but I think that's outweighed by the benefits that are set out in my evidence. Okay.
In terms of potential, if it was to remain low density residential or general residential, I see the statements at the front of low density residential actually indicate that for certain sizes it would be appropriate for and enabled in terms of some form of policy framework to provide an intensive level of development over and above what low residential zoning provides at the moment. Do you not feel, in the absence of a spatial planning exercise, that there is the ability in the short term prior to that to actually, on a case-by-case, look at the appropriateness of more intensive development in a township such as Darfield?
Yes, so the Section 42A report has recommended a general residential zoning.
Yes, I understood that. Yeah.
Yeah, and I support that rezoning. And there is opportunities for intensification there. But I think that the medium density zone is more enabling and it provides a clearer direction. I think there's the direction for intensification in the general residential zone is not entirely clear. So I think the medium density zoning is more enabling, and I think it would be more appropriate. And yeah, with regards to the spatial plan, my answer is the same as I've given. I think that the benefits of that zoning outweigh any downsides, and yeah, I don't see that the spatial plan as a prerequisite for that upzoning.
Okay, and finally, I'm involved in a number of different plans around the country at the moment. But in relation to equivalent townships such as Darfield, relatively rural service town, is Kaingaroa seeking a general uplift to medium density within all of these smaller rural townships around New Zealand?
I'm not sure there's anywhere else with this exact set of circumstances where you have a town that's part of a tier 1 council, but that's not necessarily part of the urban environment. So I can't really speak to the
Okay,
consistency.
but there are other plan review processes going on in other councils which aren't tier 1 as well. Yeah,
it is their general position to seek upzoning around the country. And I mean, the affordability issues that New Zealand have are not just ones restricted to our bigger urban areas. There's a big problem with affordability in smaller towns and with the lack of potential to add housing. And also it's a restriction on the people from those communities being able to stay in that community through different life stages. There's a lot of housing typologies. Detached houses aren't necessarily the best form for an aging population that is in need of services and different things like that. So I think it is an important issue for these smaller towns as well as the bigger cities of New Zealand.
Yeah, so just in terms of that last point, and in terms of provision for ageing populations, do you not feel that the existing policy framework enables that sort of smaller units to be provided in a township such as Darfield?
To an extent, but the medium density zoning would be more enabling of that, and it would be enable denser forms of housing for aged people. One form, it would be more enabling. But I support the upzoning to general residential, the recommended upzoning, to the extent that it is more enabling. I just disagree that it's sufficient. Okay, thank you. No further questions, Chair.
Now, Mr. Jeffreys, I just want to explore what I understand to be the 3 main aspects that Kaingaroa is asking us to make decisions on. And the background to my questions are an assumption that in seeking these changes, Kaingaroa has done the necessary research and to have an evidential basis to justify them. So firstly, in terms of rezoning the LRZ to GRZ, which has been recommended for approval by our reporting officer, how many extra lots would that create in Darfield?
I don't have that information.
You don't know? You
No,
don't know how many extra lots it would create?
To upzone from a low density to general residential density?
Yeah, from LRZ to GRZ, how many extra lots?
Well, there's a lot of variables. I don't think there's a clear answer. There would be ways to calculate scenarios for that. But it would depend on take up. I don't have an answer to that. No.
Okay. And I understand that Kaingaroa was seeking to rezone the town centre zone from TCZ to LCZ. Is that relief still being sought?
I have not addressed that in my evidence. I don't support that. I believe that the intention behind that was around a national consistency and a consistent hierarchy of centres that they were seeking, but I did not choose to support that through evidence.
Okay, now that's helpful. Thank you for that. And then finally, which has been most of the discussion to date, Kaingaroa's request to rezone residential properties within this 400-metre walkable catchment from the centre of the town up to medium density MRZ. To what extent has, or what if any research has Kaingaroa done either with residents in the town or potential developers to indicate to it and to us that there's actually a demand for this level of intensification in this town?
I've addressed that in my rebuttal statement. I disagree that it's necessary to establish that that demand exists currently. I think it's important. Establishing level of demand is important to or releasing constraints, but I don't think the reverse is true, that it needs to be used to justify the exact balancing of development capacity with demand. There's little downside to providing a level of development capacity that is greater than demand. If that's the case, it just won't get taken up. But there is the benefit that if demand changes, or there is a high degree of uncertainty in projecting demand. So if that's wrong, there is risk there as well.
Yep. So I take it from your answer, would I be correct in assuming Kāinga Ora has done no research with either residents of Darfield or potential developers to establish if there's an appetite for intensification that would be occasioned by MRZ?
Not that I've been involved in. I'm not sure what they've done prior to my involvement. But yeah, there's not an evidence base to specifically say that there is demand for that level of development now. But yeah, I don't agree that that's a necessary condition for upzoning.
And I understand you've made that clear. I'm just interested in knowing what, if any, research Kāinga Ora has done to justify the request it's making from us. But no, that's the end of my questions. So Mr. Jeffries, thank you very much for coming in this afternoon and answering our questions. We appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Our next submitter is Castle Hill Property Investment Limited. Good afternoon and welcome. Is it Mr. Endicott Davies?
That is correct.
Very much. Just with the previous submitter, if you've submitted any written material and to anyone present here today, we would have read that, but you're very welcome to speak to that and highlight key points. And then we'll see if we have any questions for you.
I'd just like to do a good afternoon. Just like to do a summary of the current consented activity that we had in our submission. We currently have, for the areas identified, resource consents to allow residential activity in the current commercial zone. Subsequent to our evidence, we've also now got a building consent for residential activity on 5 of the lots on Luge Loop. So that's new to our original activity. We just wanted to emphasise that the main reason for the change is that with the residential lots that we are creating, if the proposed living centre zone is adopted, residential lots would require a non-compliant resource consent activity to undertake residential activity. So we're just trying to avoid residential allotments doing that. So.
Understood, very clear. Raymond, any questions?
That's very clear.
Lindsay, do you have any questions?
No, I don't. Thank you.
And look, I don't have any questions either. Your submission was very clear and what you're asking for is very clear. And we've had a thorough report from our reporting officer in terms of that. So there's nothing that we need to clarify with you, but thanks very much for coming in.
That's great. Thank you.
Thank you. And our next submitters are Keith Jenkins, and then after that, Peter and Christine Bond. And Mr. Johnson, I understand you're representing both submitters. Yep. Good afternoon and welcome.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman. Sorry, paper. I was trying to avoid printing, but I sort of ended up printing, so that's fine. I'm Richard Johnson from Aston Consultants. I have with me this is Mr. Keith Jenkins, who's the submitter that we're working for. Just in brief summary, Mr. Chairman, between the evidence, the 42A, the rebuttal, we seem to have landed in a pretty sweet spot where most of the things Mr. Jenkins has accepted.
some of the recommendations around like the buffer from the water race, the timing about potential subdivision with respect to upgrade to the water supply scheme. One thing that does concern me in this last memo that came out yesterday from the reporting officer, there was actually no reference to the E2 flood risk report that had been provided to the panel. So I just want to make sure that that has been, I double checked with the hearings administrator that it had been received, and you had approved that it could have been it could be lodged out of time because there was a bit of work involved. And Mr. Tish is available on Zoom if you do have any questions on the flood risk issue.
Now, we've received Mr. Tish's report. I think it was dated 22 March from memory. So we've received that and we've read and understood that. So that's all good.
So that was the main. I just wanted to be very clear that was available. So in essence, the site. I mean, in my evidence, I sort of posed 3 questions about rezoning. Is the site fundamentally suitable? And so we've been now with the flood risk assessment done. There's geotech PSI work that's been done. So there's no issues around that. The servicing issues, even though there's a timing issue with that, there is no issue with the roading is coming off a local road, not off the state highway. And so I think most of the matters have been brought to an end in terms of a conclusion like that. So that's I don't want to say any more, but it looks like we've landed on a pretty sweet spot with it.
It appears peace might have broken out. Yes. Raymond, any questions? Malcolm?
Piece is broken out.
Lindsay, any questions?
No, I don't. Looks like there's been a significant amount of work done by the applicant and the 42A officer. So no, I don't have any further questions. It's quite clear to me.
And Mr. Johnson, I have no further questions either. I'll just repeat the views of my colleagues that we do appreciate the extra work that's been done to address Mr. Trewin's concerns. That was thorough and helpful. So I don't have any matters that I wish to clarify. That's right. And now Peter and Christine Bond. So, good afternoon, welcome.
Mr. Chair, again, we do have the 2 experts from Fraser Thomas available on Zoom. So the geotech and the PSI authors of those reports are available if there are questions. Okay, and so Peter Bond, Miss Christine Bond's in the back, evidently not keen to come up to the front. So with respect to the bond application, this will be one of the smaller rezone sites that the panel will be looking at in this process, I'd imagine. It's less than a hectare, it's only 9,000. We've largely addressed through evidence and the most recent work that's been done on geotech and PSI, Bill and Mr. Jenkins, it's sort of cleared off a lot of issues. There is one matter though that's still as far as we're concerned, is not quite settled. And I think there's, if I can take the panel back, when the submission was lodged at the time, and when Mr. Bond was engaging with Selwyn District over this proposal and servicing aspects in that, he was given to believe that there was no capacity in the Malvern Hills water scheme. So what we had in the evidence, well, in the submission and in the evidence, is a conceptual subdivision plan showing 4 lots with an access off Bridge Street, right? Now, I think that's tended to dominate thinking a little bit because those lots were configured size-wise and position-wise because that original proposition was to allow on-site water and on-site sewage disposal without overreaching the capacity of the land, okay? So Mr. Broff, who provided evidence in originally established that there is groundwater available at a depth and things like that. So what has happened over time is that when the 42A came out and Mr. England for the council provided the services assessment, he has now said that there is capacity, although the Malvern Hill scheme is limited in its capacity, there is capacity to service some of the lots on Mr. Bond's property. Now, Mr. England has not said that there's capacity for 4, he just said the sections can be serviced.
So what the issue that we're facing now is the original 4, because this is low density residential, which has a minimum average of about 750, you can get, as Mr. Truan has said, you can get probably 9 to 10, 10 to 12 lots out of it, depending, right? But the moot point now is what extra capacity may well be in the Malvern Hills scheme. Now, from a planning perspective, Mr. Chairman, I think what Mr. Truan is trying to do, and I must admit, we've sort of volunteered it initially, but on the back of the original 4 lot for a completely different proposition, is that there's an attempt to lock down this development just to 4 lots. But in this, I mean, I don't need to remind you, this isn't a subdivision hearing. This is a rezone hearing, and so what I'm going to suggest is that I think that there needs to be in the ODP narrative some text that actually says that there are servicing issues here with respect to water, but these can be discussed with the council. There can be a negotiation around what is available, what can be done, and a bit like in the Jenkins case where there was a restriction on the timing of subdivision depending upon satisfactory resolution of, in that case, the provision of water. This one could be on a similar basis around there's no subdivision until there's an agreed basis for servicing in this respect for water, because the agreement is that there's no issue with disposal of stormwater, and with modern technology there is no issue with the disposal of sewage, even on relatively small lots. And so I don't see that there's, I mean, if the agreement from the 42A officer is this land is suitable in all other respects for low density, when you look at the map of Darfield, it's been signalled in the Malvern area plan, is that the question is why restrict it to 4? Because simply that should be how many lots are available in this 9,000 square metres should be a function of an assessment around its ability to be serviced, right? Just like most conventional subdivisions are. And that is normally left for the subdivision stage, right? So there's 2 things here. The land is suitable for low density residential. And I think it's possibly a wee bit early to restrict the development capacity of this lot at this point, when I think it's a little bit uncertain, because with respect, there are options. I mean, there are options around servicing here. I mean, it could be that there are 4 that come out of Malvern Hills, and there may be 1 lot, an extra lot, 2 lots that might actually have on-site water. I'm not sure, but that's in the fullness of time, okay? So that is the only issue I think that we've got remaining here around how to proceed from this point, given the recommendation that the land can be rezoned. It just seems unusual to lock it to 4 in an ODP narrative at this point, when I think it is moot as to what may be available.
Shall we see if we have questions? Is there anything else you wanted to say? Or shall we see if we have questions?
I mean, everything else
Yep.
it's been sort of resolved. That was just the last understanding issue really that came up in the sequence of documents between 42.
Okay, we'll see if we have questions arising.
Yes, and it just seems pointless. It seems a pointless question now, because I was going to ask what was happening on lot 5.
If you examine that original scheme plan, there are 2 lots held together.
Yes.
So they've got a funny little hook on the bottom side.
Yes.
So the idea was 2 of the lots to be held together.
Yeah, there was going to be a gallery of wells. There was going to be a gallery of wells to service each of the lots that allowed the separation from the effluent disposal areas and the wells within the rules that applied. So the wells were going to be together, and that was the intent of that lot. But that scheme's out the door with.
I thank you. Thanks.
Now, Lindsay?
Thank you, Mr. Johnson. Just to have it clear in my mind, your rebuttal evidence at the very end at para 23, you have your recommendations in the section 42A report. You have A, but I'm more interested in B, about the 4 allotments. So in your rebuttal evidence, you said you were accepting of a 4 allotment limitation on the ODP narrative, included in the ODP narrative. Now you're wanting that removed. did not refer to 4 allotments. Is that my understanding of the situation?
That's correct, Mr. Dash. Yeah, my apologies. At the time, I probably didn't think through the implications of, I mean, it was worded as the sections can be serviced with water, and I didn't put 1 and 1 together and get 2, unfortunately. So yes, I'm sort of taking that away from that answer in the rebuttal.
So we would get a new ODP to be included in the district plan, which didn't have any limitation or any number of lots to be developed, because what you're saying is that servicing requirements themselves will determine the number of lots, along with all the other things which would need to be considered at subdivision or land use stage.
Yes, that's correct. And I did suggest that there was an alternative if there's more comfort from the panel to include something in the ODP narrative around, just like in the Jenkins case, around subdivision can't proceed until there's an agreement about the arrangements with water servicing.
Okay. Well, certainly when I was preparing for the hearing, I thought that had been agreed between yourself, and I presume there's an issue of scope. I haven't gone back and had a look at the original submission to make sure that the outcome you're now promoting is in accordance with the submission.
Mr. Chairman, the submission was just seeking low density residential.
Well, that's what I had thought.
Yeah, and the scheme plan was just by way of example about how it could turn out with the original proposition around.
Okay, all right, thank you. No further questions.
So Ms. Johnson, just to be clear in my mind, so where we're currently at now, so potable water will be provided by the Malvern Hills Rural Water Supply or won't be?
Yeah, so I'm going to hedge my bet. Mr. England has made it clear that there is water available.
Yeah.
Right. But I think in the normal resolution of engineering and servicing details, then simply there are potentially other ways of providing water if Mr. Bond wants to pursue more lots. But there's obviously a capacity issue with it's a small area of land with a particular configuration, so it's not a regular shaped lot. So there's a tension here in the design and servicing that will inevitably arise during the subdivision stage.
Yep. So I'm just looking at the ODP that was attached, the ODP narrative that was attached to your rebuttal. And in terms of that issue, it currently says the public water supply will be provided by the Malvern Hills Rural Water Supply at the developer's cost and may be supplemented by on-site wells. So that's still the case. So turning then to wastewater, the ODP currently says will be disposed to ground on each lot. Is that still the case?
Yes, there is no reticulated sewage in Colgate.
And I don't think the ODP currently restricts the site to 4 lots. I couldn't.
Mr. Truan got me. That was an oversight on my part when I did the rebuttal under urgency.
Okay. And so in a nutshell, the servicing issues would remain as per the ODP that was attached to your rebuttal evidence, and all you're asking for is to not have a 4-lot restriction imposed in the ODP, but to just let it be LCZ and develop as it will under that zoning. Okay.
That's correct, yes.
Okay. And so Mr. Trevin, just on terms of that, put you on the spot. Do you have a view on that at this point in time?
Yeah, so Mr. England's commented previously on the basis of 4 lots, saying that it could be serviced with a 1-unit cap. So I guess if the developer is able to source his own well water to increase that to the 9 or 10, I suppose it would be at their own risk, but yeah, I think that would probably be acceptable. Yeah.
So thank you for that. So I'm taking from your answer then you would have no opposition to us not putting in a 4-lot cap on the ODP, but just letting it be LCZ, and then the servicing will sort itself out over time.
That's right. I think I commented in the 42A that the initial assessment assumed 4 lots, and so that when there was discussion around servicing and geotech and flooding, that was based on 4 allotments. And I think some additional information has been provided from so there's, oh no, that's right. So there's additional information has been provided on geotechnical and PSI. I'm not sure about the servicing report though. Just that talked about this location of disposal fields and apologies, I'm just trying to source the
Just while you're looking for that though, but if the ODP says sewage will be disposed to ground on each lot, subject to specific design to be approved by council, that would deal with, I mean, either the lots will be big enough or they won't be big enough to comply with that, won't they? That will sort itself out.
yeah, I think that would probably be sufficient, yeah.
Right, well, why don't you,
Page 39, I think. Page 39 of the 42A.
yeah, that's where Chris is at.
I think a resource consent would be required anyway from the regional council,
Yeah.
so I think that would be okay.
So just to, I know I put you on the spot, but
Yes.
just summarising your position, would you therefore be satisfied with just the LCZ zoning with no lot restriction, or would you still think there should be a lot restriction?
I think that's okay to have no lot restriction because the developer would have to source their own well water, and also sewage disposal will be a matter for the regional council to consent as well.
All right, that's very helpful. So does any other panel member have any questions for our 4218 on that? That's it? No. Right, thank you very much, Mr. Johnson. Thanks for coming in, and it seems we have addressed your late breaking news there. All right, so now we're going to adjourn for a brief morning afternoon tea, getting my times mixed up. And we'll break now for 15 minutes. We'll reconvene at 2 o'clock. Is Mr. Galanders here? Yes, so can you, yeah, we'll reconvene about 2 o'clock and we'll hear from you then, and then Fockhill Holdings after that. Thank you.
Thanks for letting us address you. I'm Stuart. This is Donald and Andrew. We're all brothers. We've been farming a block of land in Dartford now for the fifth generation. My submission to was
The light will come on.
I am pushing the lighting button.
Let's push it once.
Oh, I see. Okay, technology, great, isn't it? We've been farming in Dartford now with fifth generation. Now, my submission was pretty poor. We've got no experts' opinions. I just put in that the block of land that we own between Glendale Road and Telegraph Road and Crate Road, just for the what was it, the LRZ to be extended. But we've had advice from our lawyer. He said, "I just go down and have a chat." We came down here to listen to Kaingaroa's report. We're going to just leave that one as is and let the people on a higher pay rate decide that, because it mightn't be in the best interest in Darfield to have 500 square metres, because when we certainly wouldn't like to see that. If it's got to be done, it's got to be done properly. We'd like to think we still live in a rural town. If you allow me to speak on the block that I did submit on, can I do that?
Yep, that's the main reason you're here. Yep.
Right, well, and they'll chip in, they'll correct me if I'm wrong. Okay, that block is 157 hectares. Now, some of it now is zoned LRZ, hopefully, so there's 44 hectares. I wanted just to extend it, should have been a bit more, should have had a plan, should have done this, or should have done that, and didn't do any of it. But what does concern us that we now, with the deferred status gone off it, we can go in and develop that whole block, with this end of it, Crate Road end of it, 100 hectares, 100 and more than 100 hectares there. We can start carving it up into 100 hectare lots and 5,000 square lots. And I don't think that's that would be good for Dartford and encapsulates Dartford in a whole lot of, makes it a bloody mess, to be quite honest, to be plain. And for long term, it won't be good. We weren't too worried about it. We had enough land up there to play with as in residential LRZ for the time being. So, but things over the last couple of years with within family farms and different things, farm succession and that sort of thing, has probably changed the goalposts a wee bit. We're not looking. If it could be extended, that would be great. But listening here today, this is a bit foreign to us coming here and talking to you. But we would have had to do a lot more investigating to turn around and put another 100 plus hectares into LRZ. So we're not naive enough to think that that's you fellas are going to say, "Oh yeah, those fellas are down there, do this," because but if we in time we would have just we would have applied for rezoning or re-intensifying that what was left. So I hope you're looking at what I'm looking at. I hope we've got all the zonings and all the new regulations and everything's right as far as the LRZ is concerned, and we can look forward. I don't know whether my brothers want to chip in on anything. They've been pretty silent up until now, but when we get in a room with people like you, we tend to open up and start discussing all sorts of manner of things. So anything you want to chat, just go for it.
Right, does anyone else want to say anything? Donald or Andrew?
I'll say something. I'll say something. We support the council at the moment with their proposed plan to basically have 44 hectares under LRZ. This area now makes it attractive for us to look at developing ourselves, joint ventures, or selling the land. Before, we only had 13 hectares LRZ, and that did not really rattle our cages. But with the growth of Darfield down Telegraph Road and Greendale Road, this area has become too valuable to farm.
Okay, anything else?
Eventually that whole block is under probably a 20-year or 30-year development plan. It's the ideal, if you look at the aerial photographs, it's the ideal direction of development in Darfield. And the sewage system and the new water well they've dug on Great Road makes sense to reduce the size of the sections, because you're not relying on the septic tanks on 5,000 square metre sections. So that's our thinking on that sort of rezoning of the LRZ, the area of LRZ.
All right, shall we? Oh, sorry, did you want to add anything, or shall we see if we have questions? For you now?
It's interesting when we get conflicting, not reports, but we get told the council should be coming to see us, not the other way around, because the amount of land that could be developed there. This developed properly, there's 2,300 sections. We've done all the reports. We paid the money for these sorts of bloody reports to get done, and I think a lot of people are getting rich out of us. We're bleeding money at the moment. It's just yeah, we know what they call yield of it, the possible yield over 20 to 30 years. Whether that's going to, whether the growth in Darfield is going, let's say the growth in Selwyn, which is the highest in the country, whether that's going to extend right out to Darfield, which I presume it will. The amenities come with people. Once you get the people, other people, things come. And the way Darfield is growing at the moment, it might just surprise us. And that block of land certainly needs to be considered, not because it's ours, it's because it's there. And it's already zoned, can be carved up into these 1 hectares and 50 and half hectares and God knows what. And I don't think that's in the, it might have been good when we first looked at it and the council did that for us without us doing very little towards it. But nowadays, I don't think that's wanted. And I think there's enough of them, but some people might like a lot of 500 square metre sections too. So it's having that mix, but we would like to see, we've got the opportunity here we're getting a bit long in the tooth now to see a very good development done in Darfield. And that's what we'd like to be able to say, well, or generations and in time be able to say, well, great grandfather did that, or the old man, the last generation did a good subdivision, or maybe not us doing the subdivision, but made sure that it was done. Don't know. We don't quite know where we're going with it all. We're farmers. We're not developers. We're okay. Thank you very much.
You see if we have questions for you, Raymond.
Oh, please.
Excuse me, Chair, I can't hear Raymond.
Sorry, I was just thanking the Glanders for their aspirations for the block, but I have no questions. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for coming in, Stu and brothers. I see you've got the 44 hectares there that are shaded in yellow already. The other part is got delayed development on it. Is it a matter of interest? What's the soil like?
Oh crap, good place to build houses.
You had to say that.
Free grading.
Free draining. It's Rolliston, is it?
Yeah.
Well, it's not, what you're asking, it's not, yeah, it's not, well, it's unirrigated, and you're not going to grow carrots in it.
It's our driest land. It's the driest land. It's unirrigated and it's our dry. That's the reason we didn't put the irrigation through there was in future, because of future development.
Right. Okay, well, I mean, there will be other alliterations. As to the future, there'll be other alliterations with the Malvern area plan and structure plans for Darfield coming on after this process. So do take advantage of advice and doing what you can in that time. And as you say, I agree with you. Darfield is a growing place for the sewage on. I'm looking at the overhaul planning map in front of me right here now, and I'm very surprised at the rate of growth we've seen in the last 12 or 18 months close by. So thanks for coming. Good luck with the 44 hectares you've got, and take some careful consideration as to how well prepared you get to go with the rest.
We need, we're aware of that. We need to be.
Thank you.
We need to have expert involvement.
Yeah, Lindsay?
No, I don't have any specific questions, Chair. I think the point that Malcolm has just made about there is future processes and your participation in future processes is an important one at this stage, but I have no further questions.
We're well aware of our lack of expertise, opinions in this, but we are next time we will.
Yep.
And it may even be another generation that's doing it.
Yep.
So, all right, time will tell. Thank you very much.
Just from my perspective, I just want to get crystal clear in my mind where we're at now. So in terms of the zoning that's being proposed, the LRZ zoning for the top bit of your block between Greendale Road and Telegraph Road, you're happy with that?
That doesn't include the little bit at the top, just a little wee square and a couple of lines there that belongs to the Catholic Church.
Sure.
About a couple of 2 or 3, 4 or 5 hectares.
And then what I call the bottom part of your block, which is LLRZ, large lot residential, you're happy for that to stay like that in the meantime, and that'll be part of your future planning?
Yep.
Okay, now that's excellent.
Well, you could chuck it. You could go back to the council and say, look, we need to rezone this LRZ and defer it. So we're not allowed to do anything for 10 years would be good. It could be a recommendation. How are we going? Say what you're thinking, please.
I've written down your brother's answer, so that's good. All right, gentlemen, thank you very much for coming in this afternoon, and good luck for the future.
Thank you.
Right, Flock Hill Holdings. Oh, they're not here yet. Okay, well, we better adjourn until they are here. They're the only other submitter we have scheduled for today. All right, well, we'll adjourn until we have Flock Hill Holdings. additional information or new summaries, you're welcome to read those out to us or else just verbally speak to the evidence that has been provided today. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. As you mentioned, we've appeared before you before. My name's Josh Leckie, Legal Counsel for Flockhill Holdings, and I have some of the team with me today. I've just passed around summary statements, and that one looks big, but they're not. The purpose of those is Liz Stewart, the planning to my left. We've done, Liz has done a short summary, but also attached the provisions, which include some amendments agreed through conferencing. So we just felt it would be helpful to have one latest and greatest version. So we'll refer to that today rather than the evidence version.
Yep, that's good, thank you.
Mr. Thompson, Geotech has a short one pager as well. I looked the wrong way, sorry. I assume the commissioners have the joint witness statements that have been agreed. So I've got the team here to talk to them if there's any questions on those. And just lastly, in terms of housekeeping, there were some questions from the panel and written responses have been provided. So hopefully you have those as well. So in terms of legal, I take your cue that you've had these legal submissions now for a while. So perhaps I just speak to where things have moved on since those have been filed. But if I've missed anything important, please just let me know. So starting at page 9 of my legal submissions, I've just introduced the evidence provided by Flockhill. The non-contentious aspects, experts haven't come today, but we've got Mr. Thompson for Geotech, Mr. Robotham for contamination, who can speak also to the joint witness statement signed. Mr. Smith to my right, landscape, also there's a joint witness statement's been signed. And Mr. Smith has a response to the statutory acknowledgement question from the panel, and Ms. Stewart for planning. And at paragraphs 10 to 17, I've just, as a reminder, gone back over previous hearings that we've appeared at, so I won't go back over that today. In 20 and 21, I've just outlined the Flockhill vision, and Mr. Cochrane has provided client evidence pre-circulated for that. So the relief, if I move now to paragraph 28, 29, where I've just summarised amendments made to the relief, firstly through the rebuttal evidence, 29A, there's been an agreed cap of 8,000 metres squared for built form, and that's now been added to the rule requirements. Since I wrote these legal submissions, there's been an amendment made to policy regarding the spatial distribution of that built form, and Mr. Smith can speak to that. There's been an additional cap agreed on helicopter movements and a minor amendment regarding sewage treatment. So just over the page, paragraph 35 to 37, I've briefly summarised those amendments made in relation to the built form cap to respond to concerns raised by Mr. Bentley for the council. And now, rather than a percentage cap, which was the initial suggestion by Mr. Bentley, an actual square metre cap has been proposed of 8,000 square metres, which will enable approximately 3,000 square metres of additional built form from that currently. In relation to contamination, there was some joint witness conferencing, and there's an agreement that the National Environmental Standard can appropriately manage contamination in terms of its triggers. And that's been recorded in the joint witness statement. And then lastly, really, but not least, is the geotechnical matters, and there's agreement with the council regarding the feasibility of built form, and more detailed matters can be left to building consent stage for additional buildings. I'm conscious I moved relatively quickly, but I don't want to dwell on things you've already read, but happy to take questions either now or I can let the team present and we respond as we go.
I think maybe we'll hear from the witnesses in the order that you prefer for them to present, and we'll see if we have questions for them. And then if there's anything we need to ask you at the end, we'll maybe come back to it then.
That's fine. Thank you. I'll propose to call Mr. Smith first, just in terms of landscape, to help set the scene. So Mr. Smith's got a joint witness statement, which I'll ask you to just talk to and take any questions.
Firstly, I have printed out a copy each of the answer. So can I pass that around now?
I can pass it up.
Thanks. There's 4 copies, so one for just things and one for each of the commissioners and chair. Oh. Right. Oh, sorry. Okay. I can forward through Josh can forward through a copy of this. Yes, absolutely, we can have that sorted. Thank you. Well, I'll start. I'll touch on that near the end. So good afternoon. My name is Paul Smith. I've been the landscape architect on this job since about June 2019 when the district plan was first proposed. My involvement to date has included outlining the extent of the zone. We've helped assist in splitting the zone into the 2 different areas, and then assisting with the drafting of the proposed policy provisions, in particular focusing on the landscape of the site and the surrounding area. And then I've prepared my brief of evidence that assessed the proposal. Following that, Mr. James Bentley reviewed my evidence at the end of last year, and he raised just one concern regarding the overall footprint of the built form within the zone. Council suggested that 5% maximum coverage was might be a way to go, where when I was preparing my rebuttal evidence, I found that 8,000 square meters was more appropriate for that rule. James and I prepared a joint witness statement in which I provided further analysis on that 8,000 square meter area. And James and I agreed on everything that was included in that joint witness statement. So moving to that joint witness statement, I thought it was important probably just to touch on just a few areas that the additional built form, primarily which James was Mr. Bentley, sorry, was most concerned about, all of that built form being located within what I had located as area 3 within the site, even though built form can go within other areas. So we found that looking at the maximum capacity, that the density of development in that area was 5.61%, which was very similar to area 2, where most of the built form within the site is already located. When we were discussing the spatial layout of further development within that area, we did discuss the potential ability for further development to be all clustered in one corner, which would not be a good outcome. And so that is why James and I agreed on the words spatial distribution being included in that requirement 5. I think that rule, or that requirement, along with the landscaping rule, which are both controlled activities, so council has control over that that occurring, will result in a good outcome and I think an appropriate level of control over that. The other, and that was also captured in policy 4 at a higher level as well, with the terms building coverage for the building rule and spatial distribution. Thank you for the question that you provided at the start of this week. I've reviewed that. Firstly, I note that I wasn't part of the master planning approach for Flock Hill Station. Other landscape architects who work for RMM, landscape architects, worked on that. So you provided me the time essentially to talk to them about my response, which assisted. So I've provided my response to you here. So you have the question there. So probably moving on to paragraph 4. So paragraph 93, hold on, which I've included below, talks about the associated values. So paragraph 93 with regard to the Ngāi Tahu associations as described in Kura Tawhiri statutory acknowledgement. Oh, that was the question, sorry. It's number 4. And then so for ease, I've included paragraph 93 below in the heading that it sits under. And so that talked about the associated values and that, so paragraph 93 describes the associated values that I considered were important when assessing the proposed Flock Hill Station visitor zone. When assessing the proposed visitor zone, which included considering the consented master plan, which was prepared in 2019, I considered that it was far enough away from the important Ngāi Tahu trails and settlements, as described below. Therefore, from an assessment perspective, I didn't place any weight on the cultural values of the area. I've included the ONL associated values from the district plan as number 4, which is the important Ngāi Tahu trails and settlements and food and resource gathering areas that are linked through the upper Waimakariri Basin and onto the mountain passes. And then I've also included the description of the Kura Tawhiri area, which is listed as number 15. I do note that that area at a district plan level focuses on the Castle Hill limestone rocks that people go and visit, where I found that the statutory acknowledgement description in Schedule 27 of the Ngāi Tahu Claim Settlement, rather to be a more holistic and overarching description of that area, because it's not just a single area. From my understanding, it's everything in that space. So moving on. So the landscape master plan process and overarching landscape design was prepared in early 2019, prior to the design team becoming more aware of these intrinsic values of Kura Tawhiri, as described in Schedule 27 of the Ngāi Tahu Claim Settlement Act, rather than the more location-based associated values. Because of this, the landscape design has drawn inspiration from the site's high country farm settlement characteristics and its setting within the alpine environment. So the layout of buildings is focused on internal privacy and amenity, and the planting pallets patterns and species are in keeping with the exotic vegetation that's already within the site, including orchards and the native alpine vegetation within the wider environment. So over the past year, the client and the lodge hosts have become more aware of the pre-European trails and settlements used by Māori within the Kura Tawhiri area, and they educate their guests when touring the station, including visiting the nearby limestone outcrops. So that's within the site and surrounding area. So overall, the landscape design has not drawn upon the Ngāi Tahu's historic associations with Kura Tawhiri. However, guests to the station are able to learn about the history through the experiences on the station. I hope that assists with answering the question.
Thank you for answering my question. You've answered it really well, and I agree with you. Cultural values, Ngāi Tahu cultural values, are not confined to the rocks. It is the whole area, so you're absolutely right on that. And thank you for picking that up.
No worries.
Mr. Smith, shall we see if we have any other questions for you now at this stage? Anything else, Ray? Nothing for me, that's great. Lindsay?
No, nothing from me. I see there has been quite a lot of effort with Mr. Bentley and yourself in terms of agreeing what you can agree, and that has been most helpful. So thank you.
And no further questions from me either. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Commissioner. We'll move now to contamination, perhaps, which Mr. Robathan can speak to the joint witness statement and take any questions.
Afternoon. My name is Dave Robotham. I work for NGO Limited as a principal environmental consultant. We've been involved in Flock Hill for a number of years, looking at buildings on site, assessing them for different potential hazardous substances, and also looking at the ground as well to allow development of certain areas and movement of buildings, etc. We put all that information together as part of this application. to look at where the actual impacts or hazards could be. We identified that there could be some in the buildings in the form of building materials and the form of sheep dip on site, which are the two sort of main areas of concern. So the initial evidence we put forward indicated all that information. That was then reviewed by Mr. Owen Freeman of PDP, who came back with a few questions, basically because I don't think he'd seen the reports, so he didn't see how we'd backed up what we were saying. So we issued those reports with my rebuttal, reviewed those, and then we went to the joint witness statement. And during a conference with Mr. Freeman, we went through the issues to do with the livestock dipping area and the building, the source surrounding the buildings. And Mr. Freeman agreed that the findings of the reports and that they can be managed going forward with the National Environmental Standard through Malvern Council. So that's it in a very quick nutshell. So I don't know whether I've given you enough information. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Great, thank you very much for that, Raymond. Lindsay?
No, none for me. Very clear, thank you.
And me neither. Very clear, thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you, Commissioner. Mr. Thompson for Geotech will have circulated a short summary statement, and Mr. Thompson will take questions.
Would you like a simple introduction to the site from a geotechnical perspective, or you read everything and understood, or?
You can assume we've read and understood everything that's been pre-circulated.
Brilliant.
Very diligent panel.
Any questions then, I guess, because Mr. McCann and I agree on the geotechnical across the site.
No, that's right. We'll see if we do have questions, Raymond. Malcolm?
No, glad it all looks been put into this. It's good.
Lindsay?
Thank you.
No questions of clarification from me either, thank you.
Thank you, panel. Last but not least, we'll move to Ms. Stewart on planning. Again, I've circulated a summary statement. Liz, I don't think you need to read it other than just talk to anything you want to and take questions.
No. So yeah, Ms. Stewart, I've been working on this project since it began 2019. Formerly was a Novo, now Graham Surveying, just for clarification purposes. I know you've read all the rebuttal evidence, so I don't think I necessarily need to go over that. I think Josh and all of the other experts have quite succinctly summed up the conference theme, so don't need to go over that. Paul has gone through the reasons for the rule changes for the landscape, policy 4 and rule requirement 5. So I think the only other thing I'd add to that is I think the zoning is appropriate from a planning perspective as it provides for an efficient and sustainable use of the site, and that the provisions have been designed to reflect the node of existing and consented development, and the objectives and policies are more enabling than the proposed district plan provisions to provide flexibility for development in general, while recognising the existing and consented development on site, as well as enabling additional accommodation and associated facilities while ensuring the landscape values of the site and surrounding area protected. I don't think I need to add too much more.
See if we have questions, same order again.
Yes, correct. Yeah. Thank you.
No questions, as I said previously. Great deal of work has gone into this.
Lindsay?
No, I don't, but perhaps just one issue of clarification in terms of helicopter movements. I think we've read quite a lot of material for this batch of hearings, but is the helicopter movements provisions that are proposed pretty much equivalent to what General Rural provides anyway?
Exactly. Just
Yeah.
pretty much a copy and paste job.
Okay, thank you. No, and I don't have any additional questions, and I think it is one of those ones where a lot of work has gone on, a lot of discussions with the council officers, so the more things that are agreed in principle, the better. But thank you for that.
And Ms. Stewart, no further questions from me either. And so, Mr. Leckey, I think you can see from the paucity of questions that we're both satisfied and grateful for the amount of work that your team, but also the council team has put into addressing and resolving issues. And so we are grateful to both parties for undertaking that to assist our decision making. So thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. And as it's our last opportunity, potentially before you, thank you for having us over the last year or so. Good luck with your deliberation.
Yep, thank you very much.
Yeah.
Okay. Right, we're now adjourned until 9 AM tomorrow morning.